Hi, this is Sergeant Betsy Brantner Smith with the National Police Association, and this is the NPA report. I have with me today someone that we profiled with our National Police Association Facebook page. And so I wanted you to meet her because not only is she one of the busiest women I've ever seen, but she's doing some really great work out there for the law enforcement profession, for our families, and quite frankly, for anyone who really supports law enforcement and police officer mental health. Teresa Kondek, welcome to the program.
Thank you. Thank you for having me.
So, wow, we have so much to talk about, but first and foremost, I want to talk about Charlie. Tell us about your husband.
As an officer or as a husband and father?
Well, let's do both.
He's pretty amazing in both roles. I'll have to say that. He started his career at NYPD. He was there 5 years before transferring to Florida. I met him when he transferred to Florida and started his career at Tarpon Springs Police Department. I mean, we have 5 kids. I don't think we ever had less than 7, 8 kids in the house all the time. So he worked midnights, I worked days. We coached soccer. I mean, just crazy, busy life, literally just handing kids back and forth when one would get home. And, and it worked for us. It was great. We loved our family life. And he had a great life. He did.
Awesome. Unfortunately, you lost Charlie in the line of duty, and America lost a hero. Talk about how he was killed in the line of duty.
So on December 21st, around 2 a.m. In 2014, 2 calls came out around the same time. One was for a noise complaint, one was for a bar fight. Someone responded to the noise complaint, but Charlie radioed in and said, I'll take this call. I'm closer. When I finish this up, I'll catch up with the bar fight. So he took someone else's call, responded to a house where someone had complained that there was loud music playing from a car. When he got to an apartment complex, there was a female sitting in a car in the passenger seat. Loud music was playing. Again, it's 2 a.m, so it's really dark. He gets out of his car, and as he's approaching this vehicle, what he doesn't understand, what he wasn't aware of, was that he walked in the middle of pretty much a gunfight between 2 felons. We call the person the inmate. We've never said his name. So the inmate was there to shoot his friend for narking on him, he said. He was out on parole. He was 23. Convicted felon, 30 felonies. He had a stolen gun with him, and he violated his parole. So when he was running away from the other person he was there to shoot, as he was running up to the car my husband was walking up to, I'm assuming he thought my husband was there to respond to the fighting, but my husband had no idea about what was going on. He shot at my husband 7 times. 1 bullet hit above the collarbone, severed his spine. We believe he was paralyzed at that time. He was able to radio that he needed more units, and he tried to key up after that, but there was no sound. My husband was able to shoot once back, but the bullet was angled toward the roof, so we're assuming he fired as he was falling. And then as my husband fell back, the inmate gets in the car my husband was standing behind and backs over him and pulls forward with my husband there. So within a minute and under 2 minutes of getting out of his car, he was shot at 7 times, ran over and pulled forward by a car.
And this is all in the course of what the public would call, a routine call, right?
Routine, yes.
Very innocuous call. And he was murdered in cold blood. There's no other way to say it. So here you are. Now you've got 5 kids. Now you had to go through a trial of your husband's murderer.
So there were so many things that happened before that. As the inmate sped away, other officers were coming to back Charlie up because there was a key call with no sound. They could hear a little, panic in his voice when he called, which is not like him. He was, 22 years seasoned officer with a lot of experience from NYPD. But as they were coming to respond to him, the inmate and the car almost hit them head on. So one had turned around to chase that car, not even knowing what it was for. And once they apprehended him, he had crashed into a pole and tried to run, but they were able to catch him and detain him. And that's when they learned everything that happened. So, I mean, I'm grateful for the guys for catching him. And just, before trial, we had a lot of police threats. We had to have security around our home. My kids had a lot of comments and stuff in school. And so that was a big challenge on top of, losing their dad in such a public, violent way. But even at the cemetery, I had, I'm trying not to get upset thinking about it, but, in the cemetery, people would drive by and yell, F the police and stuff like that while we're sitting there. And then things would be taken off of his headstone and, tire marks on it. And then, people just vandalizing stuff. So I had to take 6 months to convince myself it was okay to move him to a private spot so that, the kids and I could go and sit with him in peace and not have to worry about, people vandalizing it. And it was just, his badge was on the headstone. So it was bad. So just dealing with that and, trying to get pension changes because that was so outdated. I'm the only widow in my husband's agency, thank God. But, there were a lot of things that needed to be changed. And then trial on top of everything was, we, probably I'd say 3 weeks before one of our hearings, we were noticed that the inmate wanted to change his verdict to guilty in lieu of some kind of, he wanted life in prison, not the death penalty.
Right.
So we were not okay with that either, but he was able to apologize and, read the sob story to us, which, you left that night to kill someone and you did, but, just enduring all of that and not being able to speak our own impact statements during the trial until everybody was gone and the case was over. And then, we deliberated over 5 hours and then we got a verdict of the death penalty. And then that was taken away because that was an error too. And it just seemed like it was just like one battle after the other on top of grieving and trying to figure out life without him here.
Yeah, and I think that's one of the things, especially, because this was a somewhat smaller agency, the first line of duty death, right? And very often we, the law enforcement profession, are not prepared for this. And so it's hard for us to support the family, beyond the funeral and things like that, because like you said, and I don't think people think about this a lot, there's so much bureaucracy and paperwork involved for a family who loses a police officer in the line of duty. And here you are, you're now a single mom with 5 kids trying to navigate all that, right?
Right. And now they're older, and I had 2 still in high school at the time. And, and I don't care if they're 5 or 20, when their dad's taken, that's, it's just, and then as a mom, I had the knock on the door at a little after 3 a.m. And then, in the back of my head, I'm like, okay, we live in a rural area. There's no knocking on my door. I have a gate. We don't have neighbors, So when I looked out the window, there were just like flashing lights everywhere and I could see different agency cars. So I thought, well, I live like 15 minutes from the detention center. Maybe someone was in the area. They were like, whatever. Right. But when I opened the door and saw his sergeant there, I remember him saying, if you ever hear a knock on the door and that uniform is there, I won't be here, but I promise everything will be okay. And some of that was right, some not so much, but
Yeah, that we all tell our families that, and we all hope that it'll be, that it'll be true. So you went through all this. I mean, just a police wife's worst nightmare. But you didn't just sit, lay down in your kitchen in the fetal position. You decided to move forward, and in doing that, you started writing, you do speaking, you've got a website. Talk about all the things that you do, having moved forward from Charlie's murder.
So from that, I'll back up to that fetal position, because I did stay in that. I did spend a lot of time in my closet on the floor, just crying, trying to keep it together, because, as a mom, I had to stand in a hospital and have deputies bring my kids, and not tell them what was wrong. And we lived like 45 minutes away from where Charlie worked,
Right.
northern area. So to stand there and prepare myself to tell my kids something that would affect them and just cause them sadness the rest of their life, was like the hardest thing as a mother. And to not be able to help them, they just all went in 5 different directions. They all grieved differently. I would think I'd get one where they were a little, consoled a little more, and maybe, thinking a little clearly, and it would just be the next one, and the next one, then me, and then I couldn't help myself, and then I couldn't help them. So it was like this long, it was a long time. It was a struggle just to get out of bed and to not, carry a hate for anybody, and not, it's so easy to be negative and just stay in grief and, and self-pity. But I didn't, we weren't like that as a family before, and I didn't want to, just fall in that rabbit hole. And so I talked to the kids, and, Charlie was very patriotic. His birthday's the 4th of July. He donated blood regularly, and, the kids would donate blood with him, and he'd try to tell them the importance of things like that. And my kids, when the Pledge of Allegiance came on in our house, even if the kids were walking by, they would stop. Everything was very, he shared a lot of history with them, and that was just their thing with their dad. And so his birthday, we decided to start an annual blood drive. I think we're on our 5th one this year. And it's been amazing that we've had a lot of donors, and that went really well. But we were still missing something for his end of watch. So he was killed 3 years before retiring. And we were looking for just a small cabin to go to, where we took our kids every year to hike, and in Tennessee and North Carolina. That was like our go-to place. One, it wasn't crazy expensive. With 5 kids, everybody wanted to bring a friend. So that was close to 10 kids all the time. So it was something we enjoyed to do. He loved the mountains. He loved it there, and could not wait to retire and go. But life had other plans and took that from us. So I talked to the kids last year, and I decided, it's okay to do this without him, but I'm going to do it in a way where people will remember him. I can use this cabin as a place for officers to go to give back. So this is my way to give back, and to thank all of them who stood beside us, because I honestly can't think of a single minute that I ever felt like I had no one to call, and these are guys that spent, rotated time sleeping on my couch and grocery shopping for me, and teaching my kids to drive, and, going to school and saying happy birthday to them like their dad would. And, those aren't things you can teach people to do. These are just,
Right.
And people don't see that side of law enforcement. And I'm really passionate about that. And, the media doesn't always show a positive side of law enforcement. So I've made it a point to do that, and to share like all the positive things that happen to us, and, just our way to give back. So that's where we are with the cabin right now. Is I've secured the land. I have power, septic, the well should be going in this week. I'm in the middle of ordering blueprints. I found a builder that is veteran owned and operated. So that was pretty neat. They're really excited to do this. So that's where we are right now.
So what's your ultimate vision for this mountain retreat? Like, what do you see for the future? How is it that you want to help law enforcement with this?
So my goal is to do this at just the cleaning cost and maybe the average of like the electric, which would be hardly nothing, honestly, for them to go. Because we all know cops aren't millionaires. They don't make a lot of money. And I don't know. I just want this to be a place, and it's against the Nantahala forest. So there's no neighbors. And hopefully when everything's done, it should be around 23 acres. So there's, I mean, there's shooting there, zip line, just a place to go to just get away from everybody and everything, you know?
Yeah. Now you, like I said, you know, you're also a writer, and one of the things that you had written that really impacted me was you basically wrote a letter to future police officers, right? Can you talk about that?
Right. So I started writing because I tried counseling, and it's hard to find a counselor that understands trauma. It's hard to find a counselor that understands law enforcement. It's hard to find a counselor that understands widows that have trauma that were married to law enforcement officers, because everything's so publicized, and you have to live in this little bubble as a police wife anyway, because not everybody likes your husband, and everybody has comments, and people say things to your kids, and we're pretty tough-skinned people, and we never let any of that bother us. But man, when you're a widow, it's a whole different ball game. I get the, oh, sorry, sadly, that's what they sign up for. And, just comments, just ignorant comments that people really don't think much about. But I remember one night I'm like, I need to figure out an outlet. I can't just keep holding this in. And so I just started writing. And one day I was like, you know what, I'm just going to post this. Whoever doesn't like it can delete me and move on. So, and when I wrote that, oh my gosh, it was like my inbox was full. I kept getting messages, and like, this is what I feel like, and I couldn't get it out. And this is exactly what our life is like. And I'm in a private group with law enforcement widows, and there's probably 700 of us in one group, and it's just a lot. So my son went into the police academy after my husband was killed, which just ripped my heart out. But this is what his daddy did. This is what he looked up to. It's what he's used to and what he wants to do. So he's an officer now. But as he was getting ready, I thought, I have nothing to pass to my son. My husband's not here to pass anything on to him. So I had a lot of the guys write letters to him from all over the country, NYPD to Team South Florida to, some of his dad's friends. And I thought, man, what can I give him as a mom? So I just started writing things and then posted that too. And that went viral. So now that letter is actually read to officers at the Clearwater Police Department who go through orientation. So they're read the letter, they're given a card, and then they get a copy of the letter. And I put each officer's name on it.
Yeah, it's an extraordinary piece of writing. I
Thank you.
encourage everybody to read it, really, to read everything that you write. What do you want people to understand about being a police widow? And I know that's a huge, huge question for the couple of minutes that we have left.
Well, I didn't want to look at the news. I didn't want to see the negative comments, and people don't understand, when they post something like that. I didn't like it when the inmate's name was mentioned every time my husband's was. I just felt like it just took a lot of the story away from my husband and gave it to this inmate. I've done a few commercials about gun control because the gun that the inmate had was left in an unlocked car, and it was stolen and made its way from Jacksonville to Tarpon Springs. So, comments that people leave on stories like that hurts. And we're used to it, being married to officers. We hear comments all the time, pig's wife, this and that. And, I've heard it all, and you learn to just brush it off. But when you read things like that online, my kids read some of that stuff. And even when my husband's officers that he worked with, took my daughter to prom. There were so many nasty comments, and even that kind of article, it just took away from everything. But I don't know, telling us like, well, I lost my grandfather, I know what it feels like. And then it's not the same. Or they lost their dog. It's still grief and it's still loss, but it's not the violent, death and trauma that we had to endure. But even if you don't have anything to say, and I've had friends not even talk to me anymore because they didn't know what to say. And that was kind of, you kind of look for your friends and then everybody disappears because they don't know what to say. But even just sending a text saying, I don't know what to say, but I'm letting you know I'm thinking about you guys today, or just anything like that, instead of just like disappearing. Because man, the ones that were close to my husband, a few just walked away. And we'd like to hear stories we haven't heard before,
Right.
and not be afraid to mention their name to us, because I can assure you I didn't forget Charlie was killed. So saying his name to me or asking a question or talking about him isn't going to hurt me. It's not going to remind me that he's gone.
Teresa, where can people find out more about you, read your writings, and find out more about the mountain retreat that you're building?
I had a lot of people reach out and ask for certain articles and things like that. So I sat up late one night and just started this website and just started compiling everything on it. So it took me about 6 months to get everything done. But it's my first and last name, Teresa, TeresaKondek.com. And there's a lot of tabs on there, and Blue family stories, and just there's so many things on there. It was just hard to keep up with everything, but I did start the Charlie K cabin on there, so I need to update that.
All right. Well, we appreciate you spending time with us today. And if you would like more information about the National Police Association, visit us at nationalpolice.org.
Ma'am, put the gun down! Put the gun down!
Last year, law enforcement officers were involved in hundreds of thousands of use of force incidents. A use of force incident is when an officer must use nonverbal tactics to gain control of a dangerous situation.
Put the knife on the ground.
In many cases, officers have no choice but to use force when a suspect doesn't comply with a lawful order.
Use of force is always ugly. No one likes it, especially police officers.
Together, we can help de-escalate these dangerous encounters. Help police officers by complying with their lawful orders. Don't attack, attempt to disarm, or flee from an officer.
Use of force is an officer's last option. Most incidents can be avoided by not resisting arrest.
If you feel you've been wrongfully detained by a police officer, then seek a legal solution after the encounter has been resolved.
Let's keep everyone safe. Comply now and complain later.